welcome to Empowering Homeschool Conversations. My name is Peggy Ployer, and I'm the host of this weekly broadcast put on by Sped Homeschool, as well as the founder and CEO of Sped Homeschool. We at Sped Homeschool empower families to home educate children with learning challenges, and I encourage you to check out our website at spedhomeschool.com to learn more about the resources and support that we offer families. And some of the best resources we have on our website are services offered by our partners, and we just happen to have one of our partners on as our guest today for this show. Heather Walton, Heather Walton is with us, and she is from A+ Education Solutions. And we are going to be talking about homeschool choice in a variety of different ways this month. But today we're specifically going to be focusing on school choice options for homeschooling. Because as Heather and I were chatting before this broadcast began, is that a lot of times we think homeschooling looks only one way, maybe the way that our neighbor does it or somebody else on the internet. And we don't realize there are so many options for homeschoolers, and even more so now that after the pandemic. So Heather, thank you for joining us and for sharing on this topic. I'm super excited to hear what you have to share.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be your guest.
Yeah, having you back. So Heather's been on our show before, and actually we are almost starting our fifth year. I can't believe that. So this show's been going for quite a long time, and so we've covered a variety of subjects. But this month, school choice, we've never really covered for an entire month. So that's exciting. As we get started, though, Heather, I would just love for you to share with our audience a little bit of your homeschooling story and then how you support families who home educate.
Okay, great. Yes. Well, I've had what I call my homeschool journey 1.0 and my homeschool journey 2.0. And so with my 1.0, I started homeschooling when my oldest was 5 years old with all kinds of hopes and dreams and a specific way I thought it was supposed to be done. That was back in 2003. And what I did not realize was that my first child would be a struggling learner. And it took her about 3 years to learn to read. And I was it was difficult, let's say. Sometimes we were both in tears by the end of it all. But and so after 6 years of plugging along and getting a lot of resistance and family members telling me I shouldn't be homeschooling, I gave into that and sent my older two girls to school. One to a school for students with special needs, and then once she got kind of caught up there, to public school, and the other one straight to public school. And then because I love teaching and had a heart for special needs learners, I went back to school and got my master's in elementary and in special education, and then taught for a while in the public school. And then I had another child who had some special learning needs, and he was in Christian school. But that just was not working. And so I actually started my own school and ran that for 4 years. Wow. And then I had another child and actually had a brain hemorrhage and a stroke after that. And so I was no longer able to run my school. And so the Lord brought me back to homeschooling. So with my 2.0 journey, I've got my two boys that are in high school, and now I have a 5-year-old, and we have a foster child who we're raising, who is almost 2, and we're supposed to be raising him all the way through. So I've got 3 whole crews, but now I'm at home and using a variety of things with my different children based on their needs. In the midst of it all, I have started my own business, A+ Education Solutions, where I do homeschool consulting. I do testing. I can test children for learning disabilities and autism and different things. Also, just if you want to know how your child's doing, progressing, even if they don't have special needs, I can test them, and I can even do it online. So I can do that. I do homeschooling consultation and homeschool co-op startups consultation, and also have some tutors that I can provide for struggling students.
Yeah. And I have your website up on the screen. I know we also turn this into a podcast, so I'm going to read it out loud. But it's A+ Education Solutions, and the website is apluseducationalsolutions.com. So just to notice those differences, and that way you can find Heather's resources online. And I see we have quite a few viewers joining us. If you are watching live, just know that the benefit of that is that you can make comments and questions in the feed, whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, and we will include those as much as we can into our conversation. So if you have questions, today's topic is about just different options that you have as a homeschooler. Our first guest from Facebook is asking, where are you located? Apologies if you went over this. I didn't even read your bio. So, yeah, you're in Kentucky, right?
Yes, I am right outside of Louisville, Kentucky.
Yeah, but your services are a lot online.
They are. Yeah. I can do in person and online. So, yes, I can. I service students all the way as far as Washington. Okay. So, yes, I can certainly work with anybody, anywhere, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the beauty of being everything so virtual now. Not always the best solution, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. But sometimes it's even a better solution than in person for some children. So we'll talk a lot about that today. But when we talk about homeschooling options, how have you seen these options change over the years, especially since the pandemic? And then can you help our watchers and eventually listeners as we turn this into a podcast and understanding how some of these options may be available to them based on state laws as well? Because a lot of times we talk about options and then somebody says, oh, I can't do that in my state. And it's good to have some understanding why for that as well.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think, the options have just exponentially increased. Since I was homeschooling a long time ago. I didn't know, there was practically nothing online.
Right. Yeah, no, that's when I started too.
Yeah. But I remember getting a book about how to homeschool your children for free, and it had all these links to websites, and I thought that was amazing. but that was just an innovative thing back then. But now, it's just assumed that you're going to use online learning in some way, shape, or form. Right. With, with homeschooling or any kind of education. I think what I would say is even before the pandemic, it was becoming to where people were doing a lot more things online and fewer things in person, just maybe for convenience sake. Right. But I guess I have just seen it morph into where you have also a lot more options for students who do struggle. You can do a lot of things that will tailor and there's a lot more just curriculum options in general, as well as options for you to either go somewhere. I think depending on where you are in the country right now, too, you're probably starting to see a resurgence if a lot of co-ops and cottage schools and other in-person options were going away. In some areas, they're coming back, and more people are wanting to get out again. But the online options have just really increased, especially in the past 2 years.
Yeah. Now, I know you had some slides. Should I bring those up to...
let me address, though, the thing about the states. I forgot about that.
Yes,
if you want to talk about laws. Yeah, so you definitely need to be in touch with your state laws. And I would say HSLDA, the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, is a great place to start, or they can direct you to your local organization or your state organization that will have your understanding of your state laws. Some states require you to have an umbrella organization or an accredited program of some sort, and they can tell you what those are. But there are accredited things online. There are those kinds of things that you can take part in now that were not available even 2 years ago. So I think pretty much whatever you might need, you can find something out there.
Right. Yeah. It's just having the right connections and searching. And really, HSLDA is great for the state laws. You can they pull up a map. You can click on your state and it'll bring up the laws and then also your state organization. They usually have those listed on there. And also on our website at spedhomeschool.com, if you go to the Getting Started section, we also have links for every state law as well. So that may be helpful to you to understand that. So, yeah. All right. So you had some slides about different homeschooling options. So I'd love to dive into what you have pulled together.
Okay. Sure. So obviously, you can do homeschooling all by yourself on your own. But if you want to do something else, there are a lot of options. So there are in-person learning options, as I just kind of alluded to. You can come. There are cooperatives and drop-offs. Now, in where I live, we call those co-ops and cottage schools. I know in other places they might call them, different things. I'm trying to think of some of the names that they might call them in different places, but
right, like a hybrid program,
or a tutorial, or a pod. There's all these different kinds of things, but you can do some kind of a cooperative learning in the homeschool community, which might be an organized co-op under the umbrella of a homeschool organization, or just a group of people who've gotten together in a church or community center. Or you can organize something like that yourself in your home, or with a group of other people who meet wherever you want. And you can make that look like anything you want it to, right? There are also drop-off learning programs where you can drop off your child for lessons or for classes or for a social engagement or athletics or whatever. So there's a lot of those kinds of in-person things. And some people prefer that. So, and there's pros and cons to each kind of option.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I started a pod before it was a pod, and I didn't know I was like starting a trend. It was what my kids needed. I mean, we had 2 other families, and the curriculum that we used just suggested, well, find 2 other families that, you can share some lessons with. And I thought, well, that's a good idea. But
yes, and I've done that in my home as well. I have done that in my home, and I have also done drop-off in my home where people have paid me to teach their kids, or where I've come together with other parents to teach. So I've done both in my home as well as in the community. So I have a son who does who goes to a program for performing arts once a week, and
That's
another
awesome.
one who goes to an art class. So you have those kinds of things. And both of them have their own special needs as well. So, but I would say,
great for special interests, especially, and especially like if you want to teach something that you love, well, why wouldn't you share that? And also, other people can benefit from your love of that subject when maybe they don't want to teach it.
Exactly. Yes. So I had some tips for in-person options. I would encourage everybody, find a program that shares your family's values, your worldview, and your educational philosophy. So what I mean by that is, what things are most important to your family? What's your family about? What are your learning goals for your child? Somebody might say, well, this such and such program is great, and it works great, and it worked great for their kid and their family. But if it doesn't suit yours, then it's not the right program for you.
Right. That is so good. Yes.
And then worldview, how do you see the world? How do you view the world? I have a biblical worldview. I want anything that my kids are connected to have a biblical worldview, because I don't see them as ready to go out and evangelize the world yet. I'm still working on helping them to shape that worldview. And so I want the other adults and influences in their lives to share that worldview as much as possible. And so I do look for that. And then educational philosophy, there are various. If you're exploring homeschooling, you'll find all these classical, Charlotte Mason, eclectic,
Which
whatever.
we covered last January on this show. Okay. So if you want to go back a year, we got a whole month on that.
Yeah. So, you might, there might be a co-op that has a great reputation that has a classical bent, but your kid may not be a classical learner, or that might not even be what you want. Or it may be that you only want classical. So check into what those things are, and what programs are available that have that. So I think that's really important. That's the foundation,
Right. Yeah.
And then make sure that those in charge of that program know of any relevant information about your child's learning needs or social needs, because a lot of times kids with special needs.
So important. Yes.
Yes. And they might just think your kid is acting up.
Yes. That's usually the case. And then,
right.
Yeah, then it doesn't last long if you don't have that communication open.
Well, and what if you have an older non-reader, and they're calling on different students to read, and then your kid doesn't, or they're embarrassed, or whatever. Right. I mean, you want to make sure that they know of that in advance, and that they're okay with it, because they might be a great co-op or a great program, but they may not be suited to your child's needs. And that's not necessarily wrong, but it's better to find that out before you go into it than after.
Yeah, because you've committed a lot of time and energy and usually funds before that happens. And then it's just difficult. It's difficult to get out and find a better situation.
And feelings get hurt, and your child may be, upset about things. And so you just don't want that to happen.
Right.
And so it can, but you want to avoid it by communicating on the front end.
So true.
Find out whether your families are like-minded and welcoming. You can get the feel of it, and it, again, might be a great group, but it might be your group, may not be your group. But, if there are things that are really important to you that your children are exposed to or not exposed to, or if there are things, even doctrinally, sometimes people get upset about approaches that people have. And so just want to make sure that they're like-minded and that they're welcoming, because chances are if you have a struggling learner, you definitely want them to be a welcoming community, right?
Yes.
And make your child feel at home and make you feel at home, because you may have had experiences in the past where you feel ostracized or, that kind of thing, just because of something that happened with your child. And then decide whether you can be involved in the program or you should be involved in the program. You may want a drop-off program because you need a break, or, you need time to get something done.
That's a good point.
Or you may want to be there. You may have a child who does not do well if you leave. So you have to gauge those things as well.
Right. And it's almost like setting goals internally as to what is the purpose that we're using this program for. Is it to help with social skills, but in a classroom environment, or is it to give me time? And this is just, an extracurricular or something where my student can thrive while I have that time. But going in ahead of time, knowing what you want out of that and what you want out for yourself and your child, it just really helps set up that structure when you're going in. Right?
Exactly. Yeah, and use options that allow your child to learn and grow. I would say, don't force something that doesn't work, but, I wouldn't necessarily try to get them involved in something that is just going to pull them down or try to put them into a mold that they're not made to fit in, but find things that will actually allow them to learn and grow. So I gave the examples of my sons earlier. And so, one of them is very artistic. So I have him in art classes that are in a group environment. But I also have another child who's very into the theater and the music and all that. And so this program that he's going to allows him to learn and grow. But if I tried to say, well, you need to learn this or that they're not even interested in and that they don't necessarily need to learn, and try to make them fit in that because it seems like the right thing to do, they might be stifled. So, I just try to find things to help them learn and grow in all of my homeschooling.
Right, because they're each different individuals, and that's the beauty. You have that freedom to do that. It depends on how many kids you have and how many places you have to take them as to how much freedom you have. But still, if you gauge it right, that you can still get in those things for each of your kids. So love that.
Yes. And, you got to think about yourself, too, and what can you handle? How much, like you said, how much commuting and all of that. So, that helps you to be content with it. But we got to think about the fact that we're told to train up our children in the way they should go. Train up a child in the way he should go. Not necessarily the way I think he should go.
That's a good reminder. Yes.
So, you got to study your child.
Oh, yeah.
Because what works for your friend's children may not work for yours. But then if struggles arise, address them wisely. You don't necessarily just say, well, this isn't working. They had a meltdown. We're done. Let's leave. You can try to work through it with the leadership. But if you find that, it's just really not going to work, it also give yourself permission, not to just run away. But if you've really tried it and they've really tried it, give yourself permission to bow out if it doesn't work, and don't feel guilty about that.
Yeah. We learn from the good experiences, and we learn from the bad ones, and we just have to look at as a learning experience, and nothing more. Not blame our children, not blame ourselves for not seeing what could possibly happen. It's just we just have a better perspective when we move past that.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's so good. right. Should I go to the next slide?
Yes, please.
All right.
Okay, well, for online learning options, there are a lot of options, but I wanted to give a couple compare and contrast. So there's synchronous, which is basically online, live learning, and then asynchronous, which is, they're not online with the teacher and other students.
Okay.
And then self-paced, which is they go at their own pace, versus a course or instructor pace. They have to have assignments in at a certain time, and they're graded, and the pace is set by the instructor. Yeah.
Those are good to remember, that those are all options within there.
Yeah. So just kind of explaining those a little bit. With the synchronous would being alive with an instructor present. The pros of that is that you have a real teacher present, and they're they're actually teaching your child and responding and doing interaction. And there may be interaction and engagement with other students if it's a classroom setting. And so that, for some students, that's a pro. They like being able to interact with other students. Maybe they feel like they want that social, but they maybe don't want to be in person.
Right.
With that social. It's not for some people, it's a lot.
Distance, yes.
Yeah. It's easier for some to interact on a screen than it is in person. And I think we see that increasingly with that generation anyway.
We have, yes.
That gives you a little more accountability, because if a student doesn't show up for class, the teacher sees that.
Right.
Or if they leave, or if they turn the camera off or whatever, the teacher sees that. And it may keep them on track with pacing. So if you're looking at wanting your student to stay on track and not just go at their own pace, a synchronous option can be really good. And I speak from experience, because I actually teach online this way, and I have children who are taking classes in this way. So, those are some of the pros. Now, there are also cons to that.
Right.
If you want to show the next slide. Pacing can be a con as well as a pro. So if you've got a student who just can't keep up with pace, and they're just always feeling that they're struggling, that can be an issue. And also, especially middle schoolers are so self-conscious on a screen.
Oh, I didn't think about that. Yes, that age.
They think, they're the only one that everybody's looking at, but really nobody's looking at them.
Right.
And I explain that to my middle schoolers when I'm teaching, but usually they warm up to it. But some students, especially kids on the autism spectrum, may need a situation where they can at least turn a camera off and not be seen all the time. And the other thing could be the determined curriculum may or may not work for your family. So if you want more say in your child's education, then, synchronous live classes may not be the best for you.
Yeah. Yep.
But they do have a lot of benefits for families. And I'll go over a little bit more of the benefits with the online learning as a whole. But right now, just kind of looking at synchronous versus asynchronous.
Yeah. And my kids didn't use that till college. It's just what I knew that they could do. And so this just wasn't something. And even some of the other options, my daughter's begging, can we just do it with you?
Yeah.
So you got to listen to your kids too, and and take those pros and cons into consideration and do what works best. Totally.
Yeah. So the asynchronous pros would be, they don't have to be online with an instructor. They're kind of able to do their class whenever they can throughout the week. It's a little more flexible. May cause less anxiety for those who, don't want to be in a live class. Some are self-paced entirely. I mean, most of them are self-paced in that you can watch it whenever you need to throughout the week, but the assignments might be due on Saturday night or Sunday night or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
But some are completely self-paced, where you just do it at your own speed, and the parent is going to give the grade, or they might even get a grade from the institution, but they don't have to do it at a certain pace. And just that kind of learning may be engaging for this generation to be able to do something online, but not feel that they have the pressure of being in there at a certain time and with people looking at them. Yeah.
Yeah. That's some great points with that asynchronous. So then the cons are,
it might have a little bit less accountability, because especially if it's self-paced. I know, as a parent of students with special needs, as well as a special ed consultant teacher, sometimes they can make us think that they can't do as much as they really can, and that we're working them too hard and they can't handle it. And so sometimes, not having as much accountability, it can be a con.
Right.
And if you want your child to have more interaction with other adults or with other students, then asynchronous wouldn't be as good. And it may be, if you look at doing online and, it's just less personal. Right. So, that could fall on the pro or con depending on your child. But some people might see that as a con, is that, it's not as personal as, other options.
Yeah. What I've learned with these asynchronous programs is to have alerts that tell you that your child's actually done the lesson. Yes. If they are not an accountable child.
Right.
Because you can get way behind if they're not keeping up with it. So
right, exactly.
Yeah. One of our viewers said, hey, all special needs homeschooler here. And she said, we use Easy Peasy online homeschool for some subjects and teaching textbooks, which are both, I think those are both asynchronous, aren't they?
Asynchronous and self-paced.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I think I have a slide later that talks about, that lists both of those programs. So thank you for bringing those up. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So online general pros to online learning. I put expert in quotes because I hate for us to think about expert teachers like you have to be certified to be expert or something. No, that's not true. You're the biggest expert on your child. But when I think about expert teaching, I think, okay, well, my child can find lessons for, things that I don't know anything about. Like we're trying to learn about ham radio. Well, I can't teach that. I need an expert. I need either a book or I need somebody who knows how to do it. And having somebody who knows how to do it is way better, right?
Exactly.
Than just a book a lot of times. Or like, if they're trying to do better with a foreign language, let's say they want to learn a foreign language that I don't know. Okay. They're going to get an expert that's going to teach them, and something that I don't have time to learn. Maybe I don't even want to learn it.
Right. Exactly. Yes.
Or maybe I want to learn it too, whatever, but I don't know it. So you get some expert teaching. Or if you want somebody who's really passionate about history and it's not your favorite thing. Or if you just don't feel equipped to teach Algebra 2, there are those things where you can get somebody who's an expert to teach. Also, students can learn things that their parents can't teach well through online learning.
Yes.
And there are a variety of reasons why we may not be able to teach it well. We may not know it, but we also may not like it, or may not have time to teach it well.
Exactly.
It may be something that takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
It gives students more responsibility for their own learning. So that can be if they actually, if you help facilitate them in that.
Yeah.
Because keep in mind.
That's a good point. Yes.
If just because they're learning online doesn't mean you're not accountable for their education and that you don't need to be involved. You absolutely need to be involved. You may not need to be a helicopter parent, but you may. In my online classes,
yeah.
In the classes I teach online, some of their parents are sitting right next to them while they're doing it, and that is fine.
That's a good point. Yes.
Yeah.
It really depends on the child.
It does. This may be a good option for, and I put this in quotes too, working parents, because we are all working parents.
Yes.
Especially if we have kids with special needs. We are all working. But if you're working to earn an income, or if you're working to keep your garden going, or if you're working to keep your farm running, or whatever you're working to do, or if you're working with your other children, maybe your younger children or your children who, whatever, you might need a little bit of online learning to help you to not have to do that part.
Right.
So it allows you to focus on other things as needed.
Yeah. That's so true. And you don't have to do the lesson planning, and you can usually just look at, whatever reports come out of these. Some of these programs are great on the parent side. They give you reports. They tell you what your child might be struggling the most. And especially I'm thinking about like math programs. They have all these analytics on the other side. So, so there is some really good information as a parent that you don't have to try to decipher, especially when you have a struggling student and you don't sometimes always know what's the root cause of this. And some of those programs can really help too. So
I think of IXL with grammar and math, how it can diagnose and put your child where they need to be essentially and give them practice.
Yes.
So that's just one example.
They love that for their homeschooling.
Yeah.
All right. So online learning options. Here's a
non-exhaustive list. These are just top ones that come to my mind, but there are so many more out there, and you can do a search for those, and you can find all kinds of things.
But I'll just listed on our website too.
Yeah. So I'll just highlight a few of these. Give you the Cliff's Notes. Illuminate Academy. Okay, so that I teach there, so that's why it's number one on the list.
That's a good thing.
It is online. You can do it asynchronous or asynchronous. But one of the nice features of that is that they have a specialized learning coordinator. Guess who that is?
It's you.
who can write your child a sort of an IEP of sorts. Okay, so that's one nice thing. It's also accredited, so that's nice. It's not for everybody, but I just put it out there as students get on a couple times a week for each class, and they go full time, part time. HSLDA has online learning options. I have not personally used them, but I expect nothing but the best from HSLDA. Right. So, HSLDA is, they do have some of those things. On Arc Learning, I used this a little bit with one of my daughters when I brought her home for a while. In high school, they had some things that, she could take that were online, and, I didn't have to do anything. She got graded. And so I liked that.
Right.
Liberty Online Academy has a program. I believe it's a fairly intensive program, but connected with Liberty University as well. And so that's an option. And then you have, your textbook distributors, Becca and Bob Jones, have their own programs where you can do it based on DVD, or you can, do their academy where you're doing it self-paced, you're grading, or where you're doing it on their pace and their grading, and they've got all kinds of options. Right. iCivics, I just wanted to point out, it's not really as so much of a curriculum, but it does teach civics, and it has a lot of, it has games and a lot of interesting tools, and it's free. Yeah. So I think they come from a pretty good point of view on that for the most part, and I have used that in my teaching my history classes, and the students are find it engaging. Time for Learning, that's a secular curriculum, so I don't typically like to recommend it necessarily for like science, but some of the things it works out okay for that, but it is good for your reading and your math, and you can put kids in different grade levels for different things, and they have pretty much everything. Easy Peasy was mentioned. They have an all-in-one homeschool and an all-in-one high school, completely free. Your student just follows the links. I'm fascinated that they did all the research to put all that together and offer it out there for free with donations. And so you just they have all kinds of subjects, and you just pick what works for your child. But I would definitely closely monitor them, as nobody on the other side is doing any of the grading or anything like that.
Right. Yeah.
Masterbooks has some courses that you can purchase, and Hillsdale Academy has, I think, they pretty much have like civics and things and government and that kind of thing, which is free. So, those are things you can check out and see if they work for you. And there's so many more. I can think of several more in my mind right now, but
yeah. I mean, you made a good point, though, that a lot of the times the free ones do not have the parent helps on the other side. So it may be free, maybe cheaper, but you are going to be investing time into those more so than some of the higher paid ones, where you do have a teacher or some type of evaluator or some sort of system that is tracking all of that for you and giving you that information. We also had a question from our one of our viewers on Facebook. She said that my friend utilized Illumina Ed was called something different previously. It's the one I'm thinking of, but they love it.
Okay. Yeah, Illumina just started last year, so I'm not sure. It's a subsidiary of Renew a Nation, but I don't know. I'm not sure what you might be thinking of as far as what it was called before, but we like it. Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, and you do. It takes a while, and that's really good information because it takes a while to find something that works sometimes, and it's okay. My daughter did an online self-paced course, and we loved the program, but the quizzes were horrendous. I won't name it, but it was something that we just decided, you know what, if we ever did this again, we would not use the quizzes because it frustrated her so much. I would rather have her give me oral reports based on what she learned, because she ended up doing that at dinner time anyway. She was so excited. It was an American art history course, and it was very fascinating for her. But the quizzes themselves, that was a whole new learning curve.
Well, yeah. And so I would love to point that's a great point, because one thing that I've told parents that I teach online and other people as well is that as a homeschooler in most states, you are going to generate the report card.
Exactly.
Even if you do something where you're getting a grade, that's up to you whether you want to make that grade stick or give them a different grade or give them a different assessment or that kind of thing, because a lot of times we feel like these programs are our master and we really need to see them as our servant and use them as they're helpful. And then, take from it what we can get, even on the online, even if they're giving you a grade. Your child, gets a low grade on an online program, but you feel like they gave their best effort, and maybe you go above and beyond and you give them those oral quizzes or whatever yourself. You can adjust that grade on your homeschool report card.
Yes, because you're the one that determines what is going to go into their final grade, whether it's participation. I mean, they are grading for that. A lot of times on those online, maybe they are. Sometimes it's just the tests, and maybe you have some additional projects you want your child to do within that realm too. That's going to be part of that grading. So the thing about the Lumined, she said, no, it was Ignite Christian Academy, formerly Alpha Omega Christian Academy.
Okay.
So there's one more for you.
There you go.
We do have a question from one of our YouTube viewers, though. She goes, how do you figure out appropriate credits for high schoolers if you're the one generating the report card?
Yeah. Well, to me, what I do is I look at my state requirements. I look at HSLDA. They have some great resources there. And actually, that's something I forgot to mention that I do in my business is I do help people create their transcripts. I kind of look at it as, since homeschooling is something that you design and that you're accountable for before God, I look at that as what are my goals for my child to learn in this class in high school? And if I feel like they have reached those goals that I feel are appropriate, I'll give them the credit. And I pull from a lot of different things. I told you I've got a son who does, he does the performing arts. Well, he's had to do a lot of plays. He's had to memorize a lot of plays. He's had to read a lot of plays. He's had to do Shakespeare. Okay, that's going to go into his English credit. It's not an English course, but it's going to go into that, And so I think about not just their classes, but I think of all of their life experiences. And I think, okay, what things can I pull in? If they're public speaking, that could go into your English if they're doing something like that. If they're doing, so I just kind of look at, he takes dance. That's his PE credit. I just look at how can I go about these things and say, okay, they've learned what I think they need to learn, and therefore they're getting the credit. Now, if they're college bound, obviously you're going to want to look at what skills do they need to be able to do well in college. But even with that, most colleges, will allow you to bring in dual credits, or like community college they'll give you they might even do remedial classes. So if you missed something, don't be so worried about it, because there will be some possibilities of them making that up. So I just kind of look at what do I think are the skills they need, and I can look at some online sources and see what should be included in this program, and I give them credit. If you think about it, in public school, they pass kids through all the time who don't really do the work that you think is needed. And I mean, I know this is a special ed teacher. If a child is not going to be able to do Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry, they're going to take Math 1, 2, and 3, and they're going to get that on their high school credits. So, I just look at
we ended up putting in like logic and things for my middle one that just the algebra did not click, but he was able to program things on his computer and do spreadsheets and things that mathematically me with a degree in physics and going through all calculus still can't do. So I see that as an accomplishment because those are the things he utilizes every day. He doesn't need to do algebra and physics. So So yeah, and somebody even said public speaking too. Yes, that's a great one. And but yeah, there are a lot of resources. We actually have on the empoweredhomeschool.org, if you want to know a lot about homeschooling high school, we actually have a masterclass that has over 20 some units, just pages and pages of free resources, even some just some of the units are just on creating your transcript with free resources there. And Faith Behrens from HSLDA actually does those parts of that, because we did it as a partnership with some of our other partners. So you might want to look into that. But the other question Holly asked from YouTube was, so how do you create a well-written transcript? And again, I don't know if this is advice you give, Heather, but I always say don't start your transcript until you've done the first year of high school. Because you just really, you start putting things on paper and you're going to get really frustrated with yourself and your child, because sometimes it just, you end up going a different direction usually than your well-planned out idea of what high school is going to look like. And
well, what I did too was I took one template from HSLDA and I pulled it into a spreadsheet. And I looked at what each facet of education, English, math, whatever, and just put those down there as these are the things they need. But for example, I have a son right now who's a junior who's taking Algebra 1 and geometry at the same time because he kind of procrastinated and I was kind of letting him take charge of that. Right. And so now he is taking both of those classes online at the same time. And I don't suggest
they're not prerequisites for each other, but yes, it's a lot of math. Yeah,
it is. But, he didn't take them freshman and sophomore year. And so it didn't look like to your point, it didn't look like what you thought it would. Also, you can use 8th grade stuff and put it on your high school script. And so I went back and looked at what did my kids do in 8th grade that was transcript worthy. And we started there. So, my junior has enough credits to graduate right now. He just needs a few specifics that we still have to go back and get. And so he's going to do it. Some of that's in his court.
Yeah, and you can do a subject-based transcript versus the year by year, what they do each year. And most places will accept that. I think the military is the only one that I've heard that doesn't accept a subject transcript. So lots of free resources out there for transcripts. I know we got a little bit off topic, but that was a great question. So tutoring, which is another option. I love for you to talk about that too.
Yeah. So you can do online or in-person options for tutoring. There's a lot of people who offer, online tutoring and that sort of thing. I'm one of them, but, there's plenty of others as well. You want to find a tutor who works well with your child and shares your family's values and worldview, because like in my business, I only hire tutors that I discern have a biblical worldview, because I realize you might be doing math, but what if the child asks a question during the tutoring that, or they share they develop a relationship with the teacher. Yes, it's a very important point. Yeah. And then, it can be long-term or temporary. Maybe you have a child that can't read and you just can't teach them and you need a tutor. And then once they can read, you're not going to need that tutor anymore. Or maybe you need a tutor to teach them Algebra 1 or chemistry. But, maybe you want to hire somebody who's going to teach your child, for long-term. You can do that as well. And you can have them deliver actual content of a whole class. Say, I want you to teach my child this thing that I can't teach or whatever. Right. Or it can be supplemental, or it could be remediating skills. But be willing to pay. You might be able to find somebody who will tutor your child for free or barter with you. But be willing to pay, and be willing to pay a decent amount, and make sure that you're getting the best for your money, though. Make sure that time's being used wisely. They don't have to necessarily tutor them an hour a day, 5 days a week, right? But make sure that you're, understand that tutor's time is valuable as well. Exactly. But be involved. Don't just be hands off with that. Make sure that you know what is going on with your child in tutoring. Make sure that your child is actually progressing with that tutor. Don't just assume that it's happening and then 6 months later you're like, they don't know how to read yet. What are you kidding me?
What have I paid for?
That and make sure, communicate with the tutor, that kind of thing. So, I think tutoring can be fantastic. Just make sure you're using it well.
Yeah, that's great. And that relationship. I ended up hiring a gal that was homeschooled herself. And she ended up teaching my daughter French for 3 years. And the two of them were really good friends. You know, they were maybe about a 5-year age difference, but it was really good because they had that camaraderie that I think my daughter, if she would take it from somebody older, probably wouldn't have enjoyed it as much. So, because they brought in like Disney movies and they watched those in French, and, you know, she knew all of these other things she was interested in and made sure that was like part of her sessions. So.
Yeah, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
And apprenticeships and mentoring, that's another fantastic option. Yeah. We tend to think about academics as the education, but education is so much more than academics.
Yes.
And, you know, maybe your child, for example, I had, one of my sons who did an apprenticeship with a tree trimmer for a while. I mean, he learned how to trim down trees. Okay.
That's a good skill.
Yes. And there are programs where people can learn auto mechanics or electrician work or different plumbing, but there are also, you know, sometimes you can find somebody who will mentor your child in an area that they're interested in or that they excel in. You know what? Maybe you have a child who really wants to learn how to can or garden, and you don't do that. You know, maybe you could, you know, find a friend who does that and have them help with that, or, you know, a variety of things. But just don't just think of academics when you're thinking of education. Find somebody who uses those skills and ask them if they'd be willing to apprentice, or if they'd be willing to mentor, or if they know somebody who would. So that's just something I don't want people to forget about, that, because especially with kids who have special needs, a lot of times they may have special needs with academics, but they may really excel in a different area.
Exactly. Yes, that's so good, because and it helps boost their self-confidence when they realize I'm good at something and this is counted as school.
Yeah.
Instead of everything I do in school I struggle with, but the rest of life, you know, I just have to get through this school thing. They learn that learning is not as awful as they thought it was. So.
Well, and you can put that stuff on a transcript too, so keep that in mind.
Yes, exactly. That's a very good point. Yep.
So some overall tips I have would be, if you're outsourcing the learning, whether it's online or in person, just make sure you know the worldview of the provider, that they share your values, that they share your family's goals for educating your child. Yes. What works best for your child? You know, if it's just not working, okay, it's okay. Or if it wasn't your ideal situation, but it works well for your child, it may be a good thing as long as it works well for your family. Don't be hands-off. You're going to have to be hands-on no matter what you do with your child. Now, that doesn't mean that you're standing there hovering over them and talking about them all the time and nagging them. It doesn't mean that. But also, you don't want to just be completely hands-off and then be surprised by something. I mean, I've allowed my children to fail subjects that I've outsourced before because I think it's a good character training for them. Yeah. But I knew they were failing. You know what I'm saying? Like, I wasn't just surprised by that.
Right. You were keeping tabs and watching and... Yeah,
I looked hands off, and sometimes I wasn't as hands on as maybe I needed to be. But at the same time, they also learned valuable lessons. And you know, like you said with the transcript earlier, I had a child who failed a subject, and so what I did was I said, okay, that's not going on your transcript at all. You're not getting your credit for that, but you're going to need to additionally do this stuff over the summer to give you that credit. Okay. Yeah. If you're doing online, make sure your technology supports online learning. Because if so you are always glitching in and out, you know, that's going to be a problem. It's going to hinder your child's learning. So you may have to invest in boosting your internet or something like that. So if you're going to do that. And then some programs are accredited or provide grades and others don't. And accreditation, I get a lot of questions about that. In your state, it may matter. In mine, it does not. So, but you may... Accreditation doesn't equal excellence necessarily. Yes. It does help, though, because it means somebody has gone through and looked over their program. Right. But it also means it has to fit the accreditor standards, and the accreditor standards may or may not be your standards and your goals for that child. So don't say accredited. May be
too small of a box for your student as well.
Could be. So don't think that accreditation is everything, or it may not even be anything, but it may be good for you. You may like that. So, you know, it's something to know about. And then if you're going to, like, let's say your child's doing 100% online or outsourced learning, make sure you connect with your children in other ways because, you know, it is such a privilege to have your children home. And a lot of times we don't see it as a privilege,
yes,
but it is. And the time goes
especially
by so quickly. I've got 2 grown children, and it's like the things I know now that I wish I would have known. You know, I would have been, if I'd have known what I know now, I would have been able to homeschool for the long haul with them. You know, and so, just connect with them and enjoy them and enjoy the relationship and teach them the things that they can get from you, even if it's informal. Yeah. And then find out if that program, if you're, doing it online or an outsourced program, find out if it can be adapted for your child if needed, or if there's special learning plans that can be offered. And if so, and is there a cost? Yeah. So those are just some of the tips that I had.
Yeah, because it's the same thing with that in-person learning. It's that discussion. It's having that communication ahead of time as to, this is what my child needs. These are the supports that they need to have in place in order to make this successful. Can we use that? Right. Or is it not workable? And yes, if there is a cost, I didn't even think about that, but there probably are some providers that do provide that. And if it makes it easier on you and it's something that fits your goals, then, the cost is probably worth it.
Exactly. And sometimes the cost is that you have to add, you might need to add a tutor to your program, and so that may be a cost. But, some of the big things I wanted just to make sure people remember is homeschooling allows you the opportunity to have a close relationship with your child. Make sure you take advantage of that.
Yes.
And it's not just about academics or even primarily about academics, which a lot of people find surprising. But if we look at the next slide, I've got a Bible verse that backs that up very well. And it's Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 9. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit at your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. And what I love about this is that it talks about, to me, the aim of me educating my children is to raise them to love the Lord, to serve their fellow man, and to follow God's commands. And so, there's not a lot of that speaks to academics, although they can learn a lot of character and they can learn to serve the Lord through the academic disciplines, and they need those academics. But sometimes I think we elevate them too highly, and then we demote the relationship. And so, we need to be interacting with them, and they're going to learn so much just by our mentoring and our influence, no matter whether we outsource the academics or not.
Yeah. I had a friend over for Christmas and her 2 boys, and she was apologizing for how much they were into things and, fighting with each other. And I was like, do you realize when we first started homeschooling that character training was all I did? I mean, it's the most important thing. And now I look at it, and same thing with your oldest being adults. I am so glad I did, because those academics, like you said, you could do 2 years of math one time, but can you retrain those character traits when they're most impressionable? No. I mean, it's harder. You can, but a lot of times it's life lessons that get them kind of hurt as they get older. And so really spend that time when they're young, devoting that to their character and just what they need to know and to navigate life and to trust your relationship with you. And it's all about that back and forth and knowing that you're a safe person in their life. And you definitely want that when they're young adults and they know they have somebody to go to.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh yeah. This is some great information that you've shared, because it really dives into, yes, there's pros, there's cons, there's things to think about and ways to do it, but you can make it so successful if you think through this process. And Francesca even says that, thanks so much for the information and encouragement. Could you talk about focusing strategies for elementary, middle school, and high school? We'll see if maybe we'll spend a couple minutes on that, and then I'll have you talk about your business.
Okay. So are we talking about strategies to help them focus?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I would say you've got to I would say you need to vary things up. So I think it's a great question because especially if you're doing it online, just sitting there and doing the work all day long, they need breaks. They need movement breaks. They need to be doing, you might do an academic thing and then switch up and do a non-academic thing. You might do a thing they find drudgery and then do things that they find to be engaging, or there might be rewards like, hey, you get this done, then you have a 15-minute break or 10-minute break to do this. I think you've got to look at also, an elementary student does not need 7 hours a day. So if you're looking at an online program and they're going to be putting them in 7 hours a day, you probably want to pick and choose just the things that you want, that you need. And one of the things I failed to mention earlier, but I think is important, like with my children right now, one of my biggest things that I outsource is the things that I don't want to teach, or the things I don't want to grade, or the things I know I'm not going to hold them accountable for. So for me, that's language arts and math. I outsource that to an online program, but I try, it's sometimes other things, but I love to teach history. I love to teach Bible. I love to teach those things. So I teach them those things. And then, I give them the online learning for just the things I feel they need it for, not for everything. I think especially kids who have a hard time focusing or struggling learners, if you stick them in an online all day long and they have to sit there at a computer all day, it's not going to be the greatest for them.
Right.
Or a younger learner. There's so many hands-on things you can do that I think, make lessons at any age as short as they can be. And then also, there's a lot of great videos and things that kids can learn from that have a biblical-based worldview, or, they have good character to them, or just are very informational and accurate. Take those things and show them some of those, but not 100% of the time, just here and there.
Right. Yeah. And then quick, what about re-engaging after the breaks? That's another question. Yes.
Yes. Well, I think when I try to add things back a little at a time. So my kids have started back with their online learning this week, but next week we'll pull in some other things. So we just kind of do it as a transition.
Right. And I've even heard, like for breaks, when you take a brain break, use visual timers, things so kids know that this is the end of that free time and now we're going to be back to school, and help just whatever, try some different things out, see what works best for your family. There's not a one way that works best, but I know with my kids, they needed that timer, and as they get older too, it's good for them to have those timers on their phones to know, oh yeah, reminder. I have reminders that tell me to take my vitamins every time I need to take them. So we are all that way, just kind of forgetful. So it's important to build in those accommodating strategies everybody needs. So
yes.
So as we're wrapping up, Heather, I would love for you to talk a little bit about A+ Education Solutions and how our community can connect with you.
Yes. So I offer evaluation. I can do it again, as I said, online or in person. I can evaluate for just general aptitude and ability, IQ testing, that sort of thing, as well as I can evaluate for autism and for specific learning disabilities, such as dyslexia and those sorts of things. And also I can do consultation to help you create a plan for your child or help you just get through a tough patch. Like I said, I can also do things like evaluating for transcripts and tutoring. So those are the things that I mainly offer. I can help also people with starting up co-ops and things like that as well.
Great. That's good to know. Yeah. And, even if you're just thinking about a pod, it's nice to have another person involved in that process to think through all the things you need to think through before you launch, because sometimes they will surprise you with things that you should have thought about before you did that.
Exactly. Yes.
So, and if you're listening on our podcast and you want to connect with Heather at A+ Education Solutions, her website is apluseducationalsolutions.com.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, this has been very informative. I have greatly appreciated all that you've had to share. I hope, and I know by just the comments we've had from the few guests that have commented who are watching, and we've had quite a few viewers, that this is definitely a much needed topic to discuss. And so thank you for bringing all your wisdom and experience. And thank you just for all that you are doing too, to share from that experience that you do have to help younger families and new homeschooling families. So.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been my honor to be here. I appreciate you being willing to even to host me, and I'm excited to be a part of your ministry to people. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and I want to thank also all of our audience for joining us at our new time. This is now going to be the standard time for Empowering Homeschool Conversations from 12:30 to 1:30 on Tuesday afternoons, kind of like a lunch and learn. But this is just the beginning of our fifth year of this broadcast, and just one of the many resources that we have at SPED Homeschool, and we make available to families homeschooling or home educating students with learning struggles. And so next week, our focus is again going to be on school choice, but we're going to talk about cultivating citizenship skills. That's a tongue twister, through history lessons, because as many of you know, history tends to repeat itself, and unless we make the choice to learn from the past and teach those lessons to our children, we do lessen our options as we go through history, or just fall into the same traps. So we have a history teacher who will be joining us next week and talking about that subject. So I hope you'll join me then. But in the meantime, make sure to stay connected with us on our website at spedhomeschool.com and our new online learning and community platform, empoweredhomeschool.org. And also don't forget to visit Heather's website at A+ Educational Solutions. Yeah, .com. Yeah, I had too many screens going here. So awesome. Well, thanks everybody. And we will see you again next week, right here, same time, same place.
Hello, I'm Adam Comer.
And I'm Ryan Chittister.
And we are the host of Life After Addiction podcast. What we believe is that addiction is not a surprise to God.
That's right. We discuss addiction from a biblical worldview and how true freedom comes through a personal relationship with Jesus Christ.
Absolute freedom from addiction. The secular worldview of once an addict, always an addict is just not true. If you or someone you loved struggles with addiction, subscribe to Life After Addiction at lifeaudio.com.